Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my Game of Thrones Legends mobile game content. So tonight folks, I want to talk about something that's important to me because it is one of the events that I have always loved the most. It's always been my favorite event, and I want to talk about the changes that were made to the people that you're probably going to be using to play that event and kind of see if we can figure out how it's going to affect your strategy going into that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the May event calendar because I want to see the next time that the Dragon Egg quest comes about, because the Dragon Egg quest is the one I wanted to talk about and the changes to the event that are coming, so that we could kind of think about this and try to see if we can figure out what a good strategy is going to be going forward, because it's going to be changing. It was all about speed before, which was fun, and I actually enjoyed that. And they said they wanted to change it to be more in line with the Rob's War style of event because they had such high praise about the Rob's War. Honestly, I don't really know where they're seeing this praise because everybody I've talked to says they really don't like Rob's War the way it is because it's too much work to actually be able to score high in that event. It's just too much work. And there may be some free-to-play players that like that event because it's easier for them to actually possibly put in the effort to get some of that legendary gear. But for most of us, Rob's War was just a slog. So I don't really know where they're seeing that praise that they're talking about so much. But anyway, they made the changes to the Dragon Egg Quest event, and that's the one I want to focus on. It's coming back around on May the 29th through June the 1st. So as of the recording of this video, today is the 20th. So that gives us about 9 days to figure out what we're going to do. So let's look at the latest patch notes that came out yesterday on May the 19th. I'm going to kind of skip all of this because none of this is what I want to talk about today. And let me get down to the part that talks about the egg event. Okay, we're almost there. Alright, event tuning. Adjustments are being made to some of our existing events to align them with the success we saw from player participation in the Rob's War event. Okay, whatever. To achieve this, we are changing how some of our events handle scoring and featured champions within those events. So the general updates are that all of the events that are being changed have had their difficulty increased. This will be more pronounced in the Dragon Egg Quest and the Battle of the Bastards event, as they previously had a much lower difficulty than that of Rob's War or Assault on Rook's Rest. Okay, so I can definitely say that from the feel of playing Rob's War, I do feel like the enemies in that one were a little stronger than the enemies that I normally face in the Dragon Egg Quest. For sure I can say that, because there were multiple times where I had my team playing on auto while I was doing something else and I actually got defeated. So there was times when I do think that the Rob's War enemy teams were a little bit stronger than some of the other events, and that's fine. I don't mind that at all, but I was just agreeing because I can definitely see that some of those teams are a little bit stronger than what we're used to in the majority of the events. The event levels will now get more difficult as you progress further into the event. Okay, that's fine. We expect that. All events now award 2 additional tokens upon completion. Okay, so I don't know if that means each difficulty level, like easy, hard, treacherous, king, all give 2 additional tokens, or whether it's just 2 additional tokens after you beat all 4. I'm going to assume that means for each one. So I'm going to assume that that means you get an additional 8 tokens upon completion, and I'm assuming that that means the specific summon token for the event. So for like Rob's War, it'll be the wolf one. For the Dragon Egg Quest, it'll be the egg token, the egg summon token. So I'm assuming that's what they mean there. The end of the battle screen now has more details on how the event was scored. That's cool. That will help us determine whether our strategies are working a little better. So that will definitely be a welcome change. And you can tap on the score details to see more information. So that'll be kind of a welcome change, because some of that stuff was a little ambiguous on how you actually got your score, and you kind of had to look through the weeds a little bit to try to figure out how you were actually doing what you were doing. So anything that helps me see how my team performs is better. So now let's get to the meat of what I wanted to look at, the Dragon Egg quest. This is my favorite one personally. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this one because I am a Targaryen faction guy all the way, and anything that centers around them I usually will gravitate to and like the most. So this is obviously the one I like the most, and that's why. We've changed the scoring for the Dragon Egg quest event. Collecting dragon eggs wasn't rewarding enough for players to focus on, and it led to speed being far too dominant when it came to getting the top score. I mean, yeah, that was a thing. Honestly, I don't think it was a bad thing. I enjoyed it. I like being able to finish the battles fast because I want to get the event done and have time to have a life. I don't want to spend an hour per battle like you have to do in Rob's War to be competitive. That's the main gripe I have about that whole thinking, and I think it's flawed and I don't like it. So I liked the speed of the egg event. I thought it was cool, but maybe I'm in the minority on that. I don't know. If you like it, the speed, let me know in the comments. If you don't, and you like Rob's War better, and you like to sit there for an hour per battle and do that kind of thing, let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on that, so I could possibly change my opinion if I'm wrong based on the feedback, and I'd be willing to do that if somebody could provide me with a good argument. But right now, I just think it's too much work, and I just don't enjoy that in my games. I want to play my games to have fun, not play my games to have them turn into a job. And that's what Rob's War kind of feels like, a job to me. Since this event centers around the Targaryens, we want to have an event where they shine. To achieve this, we've made the following changes. Okay, now, I like the sound of this. I really do, personally, because I love the Targaryens. I've already said that. So if this is an event that's centered around them and their abilities, and they make it work, I'll actually praise it and be all for it. But I still want to see how it is in practice, because a lot of times things sound good on paper and they're not actually good in practice. So we'll see how that goes. But I do like the sound of that, I will have to say, because I know that me as a Game of Thrones Legends player, one of the things I did at the start was I immediately set out for a Targaryen fire team. I wanted that to be the thing. I just knew that was going to be the meta. And if everybody that watches my content regularly, I know you've heard me say that before, but I was really seriously let down when the fire team just did not perform as well as the other factions. I felt like it was kind of a sad thing to let happen because they're so prominent in the lore. So the changes: dragon eggs no longer score points. So you can match dragon eggs now, and that's not going to be how you get your points. So you need to get yourself away from thinking, how am I going to match these eggs to get points, because that's no longer how it's going to function. But matching dragon eggs is still going to be important, though, because dragon eggs will inflict one fire to the enemy they hit when they are matched. So one of the things you got to understand about Game of Thrones Legends is it is a positional game, which means that when you make a match, the vertical column that's directly under the enemy where the match is made, if it's a vertical, or if it's a horizontal column where the match is made, the enemies that are directly above that are the ones that are going to get hit. So you kind of have to look at your egg placement and kind of think about that ahead of time. You know, you may want to match it over to the left more or match it over to the right more, or that type of positional thinking, so that you can get those fire stacks where you want them, because fire stacks up to 10 times at a maximum. So if you have an enemy that has 10 stacks of fire on them, you need to just kill that enemy and get them out of the way, because it's not going to do you any good to do more matching on that enemy. You're not going to get any more stacks. So be thinking about that. It's just like in the Rob's War event, where you try to get your enemies to 5 ice and 3 bleed, and then you kill them off. This is going to be kind of the similar line of thinking with the fire stacks. You want to try to get 10 fire stacks on an enemy and then get them out of there. You don't want to kill them when they have 1 stack of fire, because that's going to kind of hamper your score. So you want to think about trying to find ways to match as much fire on them as possible. So obviously your champions are going to be creating fire, their abilities are going to be creating fire, and matching eggs are going to be creating fire. So you want to use all those things to your advantage to try to stack as many stacks of fire on your enemies as you can. Points will be awarded for the amount of fire on the enemies when they're defeated. We just discussed that, so you obviously want to try to get the max. Whenever one of your champion's abilities is used to inflict fire, it will apply an additional fire. So this is key too, because this helps us understand that we need to be looking for those people to put in a good team for the egg event that inflict fire. Because when they put fire on, like Rhaenyra or like Daenerys, they're going to inflict additional fire just for the act of putting the fire on. So obviously characters like Rhaenyra, Daenerys, they're going to be must-haves in your team. You're just really not going to be able to have a good Targaryen team in this event without at least those two. And then you need to look for other people to add in your team to fill in those other 3 slots that create fire, or cause Rhaenyra and Daenerys to create more fire if possible. You need to be looking for those kind of people. You also need to be trying to consider paying attention to what they say are the focused heroes for the event, because I'm not sure if they're going to actually change who the focus heroes are for the event, or whether they're going to leave them the same. I can't really remember who they were, but I know Rhaenyra was one of them. Gosh, I can't remember who else was the other focused heroes for that event. I should know this, being my favorite one, and I'm drawing a blank, sorry. But if they change it, then you'll need to kind of think about using those, because they will do additional damage because you're using the chosen heroes. But I think it's probably more important to actually focus on the Targaryen faction than anything. So try your best to fill your team with Targaryen faction, because, and we can go ahead and move off this screen now because we've seen everything about the Dragon Egg quest on it. Try to use people that are of the Targaryen faction, because when you look at the Targaryen faction, you see if you have 5 team members, fire does 50% more damage. Okay, so there's a kind of a win and a lose to this in a way, because if you build your team too strong, then the easier difficulties like easy and normal, if you have 5 Targaryen members on your team, that 50% more damage against enemies through fire may be so strong that you blaze through that event before you can actually get some stacks on your opponents. And you may actually be hindering yourself by having too many of the same faction and increasing your damage potential than you would if you only had like Rhaenyra and Daenerys in there, and then some other characters that helped create fire that weren't necessarily Targaryens. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out at the lower difficulty levels of the event. It may benefit you to create different parties for different difficulty levels, because your main Targaryen party may just be too strong for easy and normal. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to play with and see, because if we kill the enemies before we get fire stacks on them, our score is going to be too low. So that's something we have to kind of consider. Now, when you get into Treacherous and Kingslayer, it's probably going to be just fine to have 5 team members be Targaryen, because at that point, your damage is not going to be so held back. You know what I mean? You're not going to be so limited on the amount of damage you're going to be able to do, because you're not going to worry about killing the enemies too fast. You're going to be worried about getting those stacks of fire on. And so what I'm saying is, pay attention to your Targaryen faction bonus. It may be beneficial to have multiple Targaryens, or it may not. You just have to kind of weigh it against the situation to decide, you know, what you're going to do. Now, when I look at the skills, you have to keep in mind I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my Daenerys, and my skill level may be a lot different than what yours is at your level. You may have a 7-star Daenerys, and her level 10 ability or level 9 ability or whatever you are may be different than mine. So just keep that in mind when you're looking, when we're talking about what my skill level does versus your skill level. At the level 7 skill, Dracarys is a very slow. So they did change that recently. They made her a lot slower, which I hated to see, because that basically made her a lot less functional. Really, they seem to really like to slow the skills down, and that just ruins a character. I think they rely too much on that as a crutch to be able to, you know, nerf things when they need to. They always go for that speed, and that's something I hate to see, because I think they could do so much better job by balancing other characters to play against each other instead of just automatically trying to cripple their speed. But whatever. Daenerys deals 30% attack fire damage to all enemies. Each target afflicted with fire receives a bonus 38% attack fire damage for each fire they have. So she does quite a bit of fire damage, okay? She is going to be somebody that when you're stacking a bunch of fire on your enemies, she's going to come in and clean up, and that may not always be what you want. So you got to kind of have to think about that at the lower, easier difficulties of the event. Could there possibly be a team that takes her completely out of the run? Possibly. If you're doing an easy run and you need to chill out on that damage, you may have to remove her, because there is so much damage potential that she's doing. And especially if you're trying to get those enemies to 10 stacks of fire, which is where fire stacks at a max now. It used to be 5, but now it's 10. She's going to do an insane amount of damage at 10 stacks of fire, and you may have to pull her if she's too powerful. I mean, I completely believe that there may be optimal builds for the easy and normal difficulty that exclude her. And I know that's crazy to say that, because she's a Targaryen, she's the quintessential Targaryen, but will she be the one that actually is part of your team at the lower difficulty level? I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays. So yeah, that's her Dracarys skill at that level. Her leadership ability, the True Dragon, I have at the True Dragon 2. Yours, and that is max actually, so yours can't be no stronger than that. But if Daenerys is the team leader, all enemies begin combat with 1 fire, and all Targaryen allies have an indefinite 15% fire resistance buff. So the fire resistance buff is not really a thing. It's not something we're worried about, but beginning combat with 1 fire could be crucial, because that automatically gets you rolling right there with getting that better score. You automatically have 1 fire on your enemy team if she's the leader. Now, if she's not the leader, then that doesn't take effect. So we're going to have to kind of look at her leadership ability versus Ray's leadership ability and try to figure out which one would be better. We'll look at Ray here in a minute. The other members of the team, I think you just kind of have to play around and figure out what you like, but I'm basically going to focus on her and Ray for this discussion, because the event is just kind of almost built for them, especially at the Treacherous and Kingslayer level. Maybe not for the 2 earlier difficulties, though. I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see. Let It Be Fear 2 is where I have her. If she critically strikes a foe, they are afflicted with 1 fire. When an enemy is afflicted with fire, Daenerys gains 5% stamina and reduces that enemy's fire resistance by -5% for 3 turns. So this can be really helpful when you're trying to gain stamina, but that may not be something you necessarily need to do with her, because you may not need to constantly be pounding your enemies with her ability. You may actually be focused on just trying to stack fire more than you are worrying about doing damage. So this is a good one though, because if she critically strikes the foe, they are afflicted with 1 fire. Now, this does not apply to all the foes. It only applies to the one she critically strikes. So let's say she does her attack, and there are 5 enemies on the board. Each one of those enemies is going to get rolled to see if it's a crit. And that means that she could potentially do an extra fire on multiple people, because each one is going to get their own roll. It's not going to be a blanket roll for the whole team, and if she crits, they all get it. It's going to be each enemy gets their own crit roll to see if that extra fire is stacked. And you'll see that happen when you do her skill. You'll see some of them get extra fire and some of them not, and that's pretty much how we figured out that it's because each enemy gets their own roll. So with her leadership ability, 1 fire to everybody. Let It Be Fear, when she attacks, she possibly does another fire to an enemy that she critically strikes. So the potential for her to stack fire is there. It's not the greatest fire stacker in the game, but it's like a Ned, you know. You start off with 1 fire every single person, like Ned does with ice. So it can be the launch pad to get you really started as far as building those stacks, because 10 stacks is going to be a lot to build on your enemies, and you may find yourself killing them at 5 and 6 instead of actually getting up to 10. It's going to be kind of a long game for a lot of these levels, because you're going to want to keep them alive as long as possible so that you can get those stacks on them. So it may be kind of almost like a cheese filling in a way, because you're trying to draw it out as long as you can until you get all those stacks, because 10 is going to feel like a lot of stacks to get, unless we can come up with some crazy combo of a hero that just does an insane amount of fire stacks that really gets them going. And if we figure that out, we're going to have to keep it secret or they'll nerf it. So just heads up to you on that. Anyway, all right, so that's Daenerys, and her gear is not really going to do her any good as far as building fire stacks. So mainly, I don't think her attack gear is going to be crucial for the first 3 difficulty levels, probably. So on easy and normal, you may actually find yourself taking the weapon off so you can reduce this attack damage, and you may find yourself taking this slot item off as well so you can reduce your attack damage, because she may just be doing far too much damage at those early levels. So you may have to actually remove your attack slot to get you to the point to where you can actually keep the enemies alive long enough to get some fire stacks on them. I don't know if that's going to be a thing, but it's just something to think about. That's kind of a normal strategy that a lot of players use in these kind of events to keep their damage down, so that they can, like in Rob's War, I run characters without gear a lot just to be able to keep the damage down at a reasonable level, to keep the enemies alive long enough to be able to stack those debuffs on them. And you know, you do that through a combination of the hero level powers that you use and removing equipment and that type of thing. So let's look at the partner ability between her and Grey Worm, because this is going to possibly influence one of the choices you make. Grey Worm now is a Targaryen faction, and that's something that I was so glad to see, be, because that's something I've been asking for since this game launched, is why is Grey Worm not technically a Targaryen? Because he was basically, right there with her the whole time as her sworn ally, and might as well make him a Targaryen because there's no, unsullied faction, so why not? But her partner gem with him, when activate this gem, afflicts up to 2 random enemies with fire. So this can help you stack some fire as well, so it's definitely worth thinking about adding Grey Worm to your party. He can also be a very valuable member in a party like this because his ability causes him to do taunt, and what that can do is that can say, hey, don't look at those enemies, look at me. And that can cause him to take the heat off of people like Rhaenyra and Daenerys if you're struggling to keep them alive because they're low hit points, until they can stack some more fire and you're ready to kill off the enemy. He can say, hey, look at me over here, and don't look at them, don't attack them, and then they can work on putting fire down while he kind of takes the heat. So he's a very useful character to have. Now that we're in a situation where we're not really worried about damage so much as stacking fire, he's definitely someone to look at. So I think Grey Worm is a solid add to this team when you're looking at generating fire, because remember, we were generating fire with Daenerys, with her leadership ability, possibly with her other ability that causes her, when she critically hits, to add fire, and now Grey Worm can possibly afflict 2 random enemies with fire when his gem goes off. And his gem gets created a lot, especially when Rhaenyra's in the mix, so there's a lot of things to think about there. I think he's definitely a solid add. He's probably going to be the 3rd member of my team, pretty sure. So that was a look at Grey Worm. Let's look at him again while we're talking about him. Let's just kind of look at him for a second. He has a leadership ability of when an enemy receives a debuff, Grey Worm strikes that enemy for 25% defense physical damage. We're not really worried about that. We're not worried about doing damage. We're not worried about anything like that. All we care about is how to stack fire. So his leadership ability is not going to do us any good. So we're not going to worry about his. Now, his other ability, I was always bravest too. Grey Worm has a hit point guard at 50% and 25%. When a hit point guard is used, Grey Worm afflicts a random enemy with 1 fire. And remember, a hit point guard is the mark on their little health bar where you see that little line drawn across their health bar vertically. That's the point where their hit point guard kicks in. Whenever he is in hit point guard mode, it will protect him from receiving damage beyond a specific percent threshold, limited amount of times that threshold is met. But the key thing is he gets 2 of those situations at 25%, and when a hit point guard is used at 50%, he gets 2 of those chances to possibly afflict a random enemy with 1 fire. So there you go. I mean, there's another instance of Grey Worm actually stacking a fire stack that makes him even more valuable in this team, because with his partner gem and with this skill, he then has the ability to stack more fire. And remember, I have him at 5 stars, and when he is at 6 stars, he gets the ability to get another hit point guard at 10%. So that's 3 different times that his hit point guard could go off and possibly stack a fire. So that's really good. And I don't even know what the next level one is. It may be something even better that allows you to stack fire, but I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But that makes him definitely valuable because he could possibly stack some fire. So I think he's a really good solid add. Now for him, you may want to do the same thing. He does an AoE attack which attacks all enemies, so you may want to consider taking his attack weapon and his other attack weapon. Whoops, it's not that one on him, it's this slot, I think. Nope, this slot. Yeah, you may want to consider taking that one off because that may cause him to do too much damage and that may not be what you want, but his defense items are fine to make sure they're strong because that just keeps him alive longer and lets him do his thing as far as hit point guard, doing the taunt, taking the heat off Rhaenyra and Dany and the others and allowing them to survive longer. So he's definitely somebody I'm looking at adding in my party. This one right here, his skill, the Unsullied Fear Nothing, even makes him even more attractive because Grey Worm deals 95% attack physical damage to all enemies and taunts, which we talked about that. 5 turns. While taunting, if Grey Worm is hit by a skill, he has a 90% chance to apply fire to his attacker. So this is why Grey Worm is so key for this team, because he's really putting out a lot more fire stacks than you realize he could be putting out until you really examine his skills. At the level 7 ability, he has a 90% chance to apply fire to the attacker. Who's attacking him? Well, pretty much everybody, because when you put a taunt on, that forces the enemies to have to attack you. So whoever hits him for 5 turns, could possibly be 5 turns in a row he gets hit, he could possibly do 5 fire stacks with a 90% chance. There's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen. So the level 8 upgrade upgrades his damage, but the level 9 and the level 10 upgrade could cause this to go to 100%, or it could actually cause the amount of stacks to go higher. I don't know because I haven't seen it, but that would be cool if it did, because that would make him even that much more important. So he's definitely a solid add, and Grey Worm finally has a ton of usefulness. I've used him a lot in the past because of his partnership with Daenerys. With Dany, Daenerys. With Dany makes him a really good add to any team with her, but now that we're focused on trying to find ways to stack fire, that makes him even more critical. So now let's look at Rhaenyra. I have my Rhaenyra at 5 stars, so you may have yours a little bit higher than that, and she may perform even better for you. But what I wanted to look at first is her leadership ability versus Dany's leadership ability. Which one is better? Hers is when an enemy is afflicted with fire, is defeated, Rhaenyra creates 2 random power-ups. Okay, whenever you were playing the egg event before, speed was king. The additional power-ups that Rhaenyra created, and like with her in combination with Stannis, they made a lot of chaos and a lot of blowing up and a lot of board moving. That was key to getting those events done fast as possible. But now speed is not necessarily what you want. You want those enemies to stay alive longer so that you can get those fire stacks on them. And her leadership ability no longer really does that. So it doesn't really do it for you anymore. They've basically taken what was the best leadership ability in the game, hands down, and kind of butchered it a little bit to where now it's not really what you need because they're changing things around so much. So we have to adjust with the changes and find a different way. So honestly, I believe, unless we find a better character than Dany to add to this team with a better leadership ability, that hers is the leadership ability you're going to want to go with now, because that's going to immediately get you on the path of adding fire stacks. So that's kind of what you're going to want to do. So until I see a better one, I'm going to say that Dany is the leader you want to go with in this team. Now let's look at her other abilities. Hang on, let me go back here. I never jest about Cake 2. I have that at this level for the 5-star version. When Rhaenyra receives a buff, she has a 75% chance of triggering a power-up. that doesn't really matter in this version of the egg event either. So we're not really concerned about either one of these skills, honestly, if you want to know the truth. So let's look at her Ride to Battle and Glory skill. So at the level 7 version, Rhaenyra deals 60% attack fire damage to all enemies. She inflicts fire upon them, and she also has a 90% chance to remove a buff from them, and enemies who had a buff removed are afflicted with 1 additional fire. Okay, so here is Rhaenyra's skill that definitely helps stack the fire. Rhaenyra, when she does this skill, and it is a normal, so it does go off a little bit quicker than Dany, deals 60% damage and inflicts fire upon them. So that means she does it to all. She inflicts fire damage and inflicts fire upon them. Okay, so if she did also remove a buff from any of them, then they will get an additional fire. So she has the capability to stack up to 2 on people. So that makes her really useful, possibly. If you can find somebody that does more damage, we're not worried about damage, I need to quit saying that. If you can find somebody that can stack fire better, then it's possible at this point that maybe Rhaenyra phases out of this team, if you can find a team that stacks fire better than this. Right now she's going to put a fire on them every time she attacks, and her speed is at a normal, so it is possible that you can get her speed off 2, possibly 3 times per battle if you draw it out long enough, which you will be playing the long game on most of these battles. So it is quite feasible to say that you might get this skill off 3 times. And if that's the case, she has the ability to put up to 3 fire on them if you're working on the same enemies for that whole time. So, you know, the way that the battles flow and you get like 3 enemies and then you kill those and you get like 1, or you get like 2, or you get 3 more, that kind of causes you to not be able to draw out her ability so many times and add the stacks up. So it's going to be really interesting to see if that 1 stack that she puts on each one of those enemies until you kill them is going to be justify her being in the team. I know that's a crazy statement to make, because you just, when you think about a Targaryen egg event, it's Rhaenyra's event. But is she actually going to be the best one for the team? I don't know, because we're not really so concerned with the Targaryen faction damage, because on the easy and normal versions of the event we may be doing too much damage, so we may have to consider that. Now for the Kingslayer and the Treacherous, it may not matter, because she may, you know, help to do the damage you need to actually get rid of them, to, you know, in the long run. So it may not, it may balance itself out. I don't know. We're just going to have to test and see. But that's where she's at, okay? And then there's other characters that you may want to look at to fill out the party. Right now we've got 3, so we've got 2 other slots that we need to kind of consider what we're going to do with. And I kind of wanted to look at Caraxes a little bit, because I think his Red Dragon gem, when matched, these gems deal 100% attack damage and apply fire to all enemies. So, oh man, that makes Caraxes a possible gem for this event team, because if he can get that Red Dragon gem on the board and you can destroy it, and then everybody gets a fire, and if you could do that multiple times per battle, that could make him really, really good for this event. So we're going to have to look at possibly Caraxes as being one that you would want to put in there. He is fast, so that means he will go off 2, 3, possibly 4 times per battle. So he is definitely one that you want to maybe look at adding. I have him at the level 7 ability. So right now I see that he deals 85% attack physical damage to all enemies. He then has a 90% chance to destroy 2 hazards. His hazard is his Red Dragon gem. Oh, okay, wait a minute. So it's not. When Caraxes destroys a hazard, he replaces it with a red dragon gem. Okay, that's the red dragon gem. So, I don't know. When using Bloodworm Shriek. So, I don't know. It almost seems like he's going to be a really good add. A hazard is an obstacle on the puzzle board that you can inhibit matches or negatively affect your team. Okay, so this is going to be a one to actually play with and see, but I'm going to have a feeling that Caraxes is actually going to be good for this event. And I really hope he is, because obviously I've been working on him pretty hard. I can't believe I'm going to say that, because for the longest time I said Caraxes was trash, and I had him at like 6 stars in level 1. But I've put a lot of work into my Caraxes lately, because he's actually had some changes and he's actually come on and been good. His gear, you'll just kind of have to figure out what you think is important to you. Now, the other ones that you may want to consider adding to your party, let's look at Dragonstone Mender. When an enemy is afflicted with fire, the Mender has a 50% chance to apply an additional fire. So this makes the Mender really attractive to be part of this team, because that does not say when he afflicts an enemy with fire. It says when an enemy is afflicted with fire. That means when anybody else does a fire on an enemy, he has a 50% chance to put an additional one on there. So how in the world can you have a team and not have him? The Mender, in his Soothing Flame skill, heals all allies. This heal can critically heal, and each ally has a 90% chance to remove one debuff. So he gives you some of that critical healing that you might need to help keep your people alive in the long game. So, man, Dragonstone Mender looks really good for this team. So he's a definite possibility. Let's look at the Maester real quick, because the Maester has technically always been one that's been good for a fire team as well. When another allied Targaryen is damaged. So he is going to shine the most whenever he's in a party with the most Targaryens. So if you have Rhaenyra, Dany, and Grey Worm, that's 3. So when one of those 3 is damaged, the Maester heals them for 15% attack. This heal can critically heal. Anytime an ally is critically healed, the Maester grants them 1 renew and afflicts 2 random enemies with fire. This sounds good for this party too, because that renew is really cool when it goes off and you get that renew on your people and you're like, where'd that come from? Well, it's from this guy. And to flick 2 random enemies with fire, this is a tough choice between him and the Mender, because the Mender puts it on all. He puts it on 2, but he can also throw down a renew, plus he does a heal. But that's only when it's critical, which is going to be less, but still, dang. I mean, for the long game, that renew can be clutch. So, man, I don't know. Let's look at his other skill. The Maester's Medicine, which is a normal. Maester heals a target ally for 90% attack, grants them taunt. This heal can critically heal, and the Maester has a 10% bonus critical chance. So what I've been doing with him, which has been very successful, and this may be kind of a mechanic that you want to exploit a little bit on your team too, is especially when I have Grey Worm. I like to charge his skill up and have Grey Worm at the point where he's taken some damage. Then I put this skill on Grey Worm, and yes, I know Grey Worm's going to taunt on his own anyway, but when he taunts with this skill, he gets healed by a massive amount, and that can keep my Grey Worm going for a long time. So this in combination with Grey Worm has been really good to me. So that's something you may want to think about, because having the, and especially in the tower, when you're doing the Targaryen team in the tower, when you're trying to figure out how to keep Rhaenyra and Dany alive so that they can do damage the longest, having the Maester put this skill on Grey Worm and having Grey Worm doing the taunt from his skill and doing the taunt from the Maester's skill that he put on him, he's constantly in taunt mode, and he can keep them, the heat off them for longer and allow them to do their thing with the fire stacks and the damage and all that. So this one's going to be a really tough choice. I think maybe the Maester shines more in the tower, maybe not so much in the Dragon Egg event. I'm not sure. We're gonna look at that, but for right now I'm looking at Mender, Maester, and Dany, and Rhaenyra, and Caraxes. Man, that sounds, and Grey Worm. So that sounds like a pretty solid grouping of heroes. You kind of have to leave one out if you're only going to make 5, and I think it might be the Maester that I leave out in preparation for choosing the Mender instead, because I think the Mender skill will probably do more fire than the Maester, and he doesn't do the taunt or any of that, but he still has a heal and he still has the ability to put a lot of fire out there. So I honestly think that the Mender may be a better choice for adding fire stacks. So anyway, I'm looking at the time, and this video's went on for 45 minutes already. I didn't intend for it to go that long. So I know there's other people that inflict fire, like Barrick. There's others out there like, gosh, what's his name? Where's he at? Hang on. Let me find him. Daenerys' brother. Viserys, he inflicts fire. So there's other people that could possibly make really good team players, but I think for me, what I'm going to try to focus on at the start is I'm going to try to focus on Dany, Rhaenyra, Grey Worm, possibly Caraxes, and Mender, and I'm going to see how that team works out and see what kind of a synergy I can play with that. But that was a discussion on how the Dragon Egg event is changing and the things that you need to think about as far as how you're going to play it. Remember, the difficulty levels are going to influence how you build your team. For the easy levels, you may choose to do something else and leave certain characters out. For the harder levels, you may want to put your A team back in and let them handle it while still being able to do a significant amount of damage when needed. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Dragon Egg event and the changes coming up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If this video entertained you or taught you anything, then please think about liking and subscribing on my channel. I'm trying to reach my next milestone of 5,000 subscribers, and I would love it if you would join me in that. Drag me across the finish line. That'd be great. I'd appreciate it. As always, I do appreciate you watching my content. I hope you have a great night, and I hope you have fun in Game of Thrones Legends, and I'll be seeing you in a video about this game coming soon. Peace.